TOPS Professional Voiding Accounts Payable Checks. This course will discuss voiding accounts payable checks. We will cover voiding both checks that have been cut through TOPS and handwritten checks that were entered into TOPS manually. First, we'll go over voiding a check that was cut or printed using TOPS. To begin, click on AP, Checks, and Void Checks. In order to void a check, you'll need to know some information about that check. You'll need to know which bank account the check was drawn on. Selecting that bank account is the first step in the void check process. Click on the drop-down arrow next to Bank ID to open the Bank Selector window. Then, just select the correct account and click OK. You'll also need to know the number of the check that you want to void. There is no lookup process for this in the Void Checks window, so you'll want to make sure you have the check number before starting the process. Then, enter that number into the check number field. Finally, you'll need to know the date on the check. Again, there's no lookup process for this within the Void Checks area. Enter that date into the check date field. You can see that the effective date has self-populated based on the check date or the date that the check was cut. Depending on the reason you're voiding the check, you may want to change this to another date. Be aware, though, that when backdating a void check, your effective date must be in the current year. You cannot void a check into a closed year. Next, we'll enter in the reason that we're voiding this check. Once we've completed entering in all of our information, we'll click OK to save it. Because we're actually creating a void batch, at this time we could enter in the information of another check if we have more than one that needs to be voided. Since we only have the one check to void, our next step is to post this into the system. Click Yes to confirm the posting of this void check. After voiding a check, TOPS produces a void check report. Let's print that to the screen so we can take a look at it. This report gives us all of the details of our voided check. Viewing and/or printing our void check report completes the void check posting process. Voiding a check that has been cut through TOPS will put the voucher back into the system so that you can cut a new check. By clicking Print Checks, you can see that invoice for sample utility is available for us to cut a new check to replace the one that was lost. If you do not want to cut a new check for that invoice, perhaps because the check was actually cut for the wrong amount or made out to the wrong vendor, then you'll want to use the AP Adjustments function to cancel this voucher and re-enter a new one. We have another recorded class in the library which goes over the AP Adjustments function. Manual checks, or checks that were entered in through Enter AP as a handwritten check, cannot be voided using the standard void check process. To void a handwritten check, you actually have to re-enter the check information but with a negative value. To begin, click on Enter AP. We'll have to change our transaction type to a handwritten check. Next, we'll need to select the vendor who the check was originally cut for. To select the vendor, click the drop-down arrow next to Vendor ID, click on the vendor to choose them, and then click OK. Next, we'll enter the number of the invoice from the original check. Because this invoice number is already in the system and associated with this vendor from when we first entered in this handwritten check, TOPS pops up with a notification so that we don't duplicate. If you click OK on this message, it goes away and we can continue entering in our information. Next is our reference information, or the reason we're voiding this check. Because we can't use the standard void check process for a handwritten check, and there would be no other indicator other than the negative amount that this is a void transaction, I like to start with void check, and then after that, the reason for the void. In this instance, I'm going to leave the check date and invoice date as today. You could always change them to match the original date on the check, but since it's in this year and even this month, there's really no need. Next, we'll enter in the amount. This should match the original amount of the check, but with a negative sign in front. Now we'll enter in the check number, which should be the same number as the original check. Finally, you'll want to make sure that this void is distributed the same way the original check was. In this case, it went to our management fee expense account. Once you've completed entering all of the information, click OK to save this void check. Since we're using the standard Enter AP function, you could enter additional invoices to be paid, additional handwritten checks, or even more voids of handwritten checks. Since this is the only transaction we have at this time, we'll click Close to exit this screen. The next step in the process is to post this void. Click OK to complete the posting of this handwritten check void. To exit this screen, click OK. Now let's take a look at how both of these transactions show on an Accounts Payable Check Register report. To print that report, click on the Reports tab, and then Check Register. We'll need to extend our date range to ensure that it will encompass both transactions. You also want to make sure that the Show Voided Checks box is checked. Then, click OK. We'll select Print to Screen so we can all see the report, and then click Print. The check that we voided using the standard void check process shows as a void in the system. There is no vendor or dollar amount associated with this voided check. The handwritten check shows as two transactions. The first is the original check entry, and the second is our voided check with the negative amount. This completes our TOPS Professional Voiding AP Checks course. Thank you.